In 1929, the world changed. The stock market crash plunged America into a decade of darkness known as the Great Depression. But for 9 out of 10 rural families, the darkness was not just economic, it was literal. While cities glittered with electric lights, the countryside remained untouched by the power grid. For 10 long years, these families lived in a world without switches, without refrigerators, without the hum of modern life. They were living in a permanent blackout. This wasn't a temporary power outage. This was a decade-long reality where one mistake could destroy everything you'd worked for. How do you preserve food for a family of 8 when a single error means watching them slowly starve? How do you light a home when a misplaced flame could leave you permanently disfigured? How do you survive when there's no room for error? These weren't theoretical questions. They were daily challenges where failure meant catastrophe. This is the story of how millions of Americans survived a 10-year blackout, where every skill mastered was a life saved and every mistake made was a family destroyed. And today, with power grids more fragile than ever and blackouts becoming the new normal, their lessons aren't just history. They may be our future. Survival isn't theory, it's history. This is the Prepper Age. Kerosene lamps, death by fire. The sun sets and the real danger begins. Every night, rural families faced an impossible choice: live in complete darkness or risk everything for a few hours of light. There was no safe option. The kerosene lamp that provided comfort was the same flame that could steal everything you loved. Fire was the silent destroyer of the 1930s. The Henderson family of Iowa learned this the hard way in 1932. 8-year-old Mary knocked over a kerosene lamp while reaching for her doll. Within minutes, their 2-story farmhouse was an inferno. Mary survived, but the burns covered 60% of her body, leaving her disfigured for life. Her 3 younger siblings didn't make it out. Her parents spent the rest of the Depression caring for a child who would never again be able to work, their survival depending on the charity of neighbors who had little to spare. But families who mastered the art of safe lighting didn't just survive, they thrived. The Kowalski family of Minnesota developed a system of lamp placement and maintenance that kept them safe for the entire decade. They positioned their lamps in metal trays filled with sand, created fire breaks around their lighting areas, and trained even their youngest children in proper lamp handling. Their house became a beacon of safety in their community, and they never lost a single family member to fire. The primary weapon in this battle was the kerosene lamp, but it demanded respect and precision. These devices produced light equivalent to a single 25-watt bulb, but that small flame burned at over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The glass chimneys had to be cleaned weekly, a tedious process that left many with permanent scars on their hands and forearms. Children learned to fear the weekly cleaning ritual, knowing that one slip could mean months of agony. As one survivor, Ruth Hartwig Olhoff, recalled, "Before we always had kerosene lanterns or lamps, and every weekend we'd always have to wash all of them chimneys so they'd be clean for the next week." The scars on her hands, still visible decades later, told the story of countless cleaning sessions where boiling glass and scalding kerosene left their mark. Gas lanterns offered brighter light, but came with explosive consequences. In 1934, the Morrison family of Kansas was preparing for their daughter's wedding when their gas lantern malfunctioned. The explosion was heard 3 miles away. The bride-to-be lost her left arm and was blinded in one eye. The wedding dress, carefully sewn from feed sacks over months of preparation, was destroyed, along with half their house. She never married. The physical scars healed, but the emotional wounds lasted a lifetime. Yet families who understood gas lantern technology gained a significant advantage. The Peterson family of Nebraska became the unofficial lighting experts of their county. They taught neighbors how to properly maintain gas lanterns, how to detect dangerous pressure buildup, and how to safely extinguish them. Their expertise saved dozens of families from similar disasters, and their well-lit home became the community gathering place for evening activities. In the barn, the stakes were even higher. Leonard Leffel remembered the constant tension. In the house, we had kerosene lamps. In the barn, we had kerosene lamps. You got used to looking in the dark, seeing in the dark. The worst to do was having to get the hay out of the barn at night to feed the cows. You didn't take any lanterns up there, you went by what you could see or feel. This was a world where light was both salvation and destruction, where mastering the darkness meant mastering survival itself. Manual labor, crippled for life. Before dawn broke, the battle for survival began. In a world without electricity, every task carried the potential for permanent injury, and every shortcut could cripple you for life. The rhythm of existence was dictated not by convenience, but by the brutal reality that one careless moment could make you a burden on your family's already desperate struggle. Milking cows was a daily gamble with disability. In 1933, farmer John Brennan of Wisconsin was kicked in the knee by a startled Holstein. The bone shattered, but with no money for proper medical care, it healed crooked. For the rest of his life, he walked with a severe limp that slowed down every farm task. His reduced productivity meant less food for his family, and his wife had to take on dangerous fieldwork that women weren't physically equipped to handle. One kick didn't just injure John, it endangered his entire family's survival. But farmers who developed proper milking techniques gained a crucial advantage. The Schmidt family of Ohio created a systematic approach to cow handling that prevented injuries and increased milk production. They built proper milking stalls, trained their cows to respond to specific commands, and developed a rotation system that kept both animals and humans calm. Their methods were so effective that neighbors paid them to teach the techniques, providing the Schmidt family with additional income during the hardest years. Field work was a minefield of potential catastrophe. Horses and mules were powerful but unpredictable partners. A moment of inattention could result in being dragged across rocky fields, bones broken, flesh torn. The lucky ones ended up with permanent limps. The unlucky ones were crushed under 1,000-pound plows, their bodies mangled beyond recognition. The Olson family of Iowa lost their eldest son, Eric, in 1935 when their plow horse spooked during a thunderstorm. The boy was dragged nearly a quarter mile before the horse stopped. He survived, but his left arm was so badly damaged it had to be amputated. At 16, Eric went from being the family's strongest worker to someone who needed help with basic tasks. The family's farming capacity was cut in half, and they nearly starved the following winter. Water procurement was a constant source of injury and illness. Hand pumps could freeze and shatter, sending metal fragments into faces and hands. Wells could collapse without warning, trapping anyone unlucky enough to be drawing water. But the greatest danger was contamination. A single dead animal in the water supply could poison an entire family with dysentery or typhoid fever. The Murphy family of Nebraska learned this lesson in the cruelest way possible. In 1936, their youngest daughter, 6-year-old Catherine, fell into their well and drowned. By the time they recovered her body 3 days later, the water was contaminated. Rather than dig a new well, an expense they couldn't afford, they tried to purify the water with boiling. It wasn't enough. Within 2 weeks, the entire family was sick with typhoid. Catherine's mother and baby brother died within days of each other. The surviving family members were so weakened by illness that they couldn't maintain their farm and lost everything. Yet families who mastered water management gained a significant survival advantage. The Anderson family of Minnesota developed a comprehensive water system that included multiple wells, proper filtration, and storage techniques. They never suffered from waterborne illness, and their reliable water supply allowed them to maintain better hygiene and health throughout the Depression. Their children grew up stronger and healthier than most, giving the family a crucial edge in survival. The wood-burning stove was the heart of the home, but it was also a source of constant danger. These cast-iron beasts burned at temperatures exceeding 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Children were regularly burned when their clothing caught fire, leaving them with scars that marked them for life. Women suffered horrific burns from exploding stove doors and scalding water, injuries that often left them unable to perform essential household tasks. This was a life where every calorie consumed was earned through physical risk, where every day brought new challenges that could permanently alter your family's chances of survival. Food preservation, starvation, or poison. In a world without refrigeration, food preservation was the ultimate high-stakes gamble. One mistake didn't just mean losing a meal, it meant watching your family slowly waste away as winter stretched on with empty pantries. The techniques that kept food safe were the same techniques that could kill you if done wrong. Botulism was the invisible killer lurking in every jar. The Kowalski family of Michigan learned this in 1934 when they tried to preserve green beans that had sat too long after picking. Within a week of eating the canned beans, all 5 family members were paralyzed and struggling to breathe. The parents died first, unable to swallow or speak, their eyes wide with terror as they suffocated. The 3 children lingered for days, their small bodies fighting the toxin that was slowly shutting down their nervous systems. Only the youngest, 4-year-old Anna, survived, but she was left with permanent neurological damage that affected her speech and movement for the rest of her life. The rule was absolute: no more than 4 hours from garden to jar. Families who followed this rule religiously gained a massive survival advantage. The Thompson family of Iowa became legendary in their community for their canning expertise. They developed a system of staggered harvesting and immediate processing that allowed them to preserve over 1,200 jars of food each year. Their cellar was a treasure trove of perfectly preserved vegetables that sustained them through the harshest winters. Neighbors would trade precious resources just for a few jars of the Thompson family's safely canned food. But even perfect technique couldn't save you from equipment failure. Glass jars could shatter during processing, sending boiling water and scalding food across anyone nearby. The metal lids could fail, allowing deadly bacteria to contaminate entire batches of food. Families who lost their winter food supply to equipment failure faced a slow, agonizing death by starvation. The Patterson family of Kansas experienced this nightmare in 1936. A faulty batch of jar lids caused their entire winter vegetable supply to spoil. By February, they were eating tree bark and grass to survive. The children's growth was permanently stunted by malnutrition, and the youngest daughter developed rickets that left her with deformed legs. The family survived, but they were forever marked by those months of starvation. Root cellars were another gamble with survival. These underground chambers had to maintain perfect temperature and humidity, or the stored food would rot and become deadly. Families who built their cellars correctly gained months of fresh food storage. The Larson family of Minnesota constructed a root cellar so well designed that it kept vegetables fresh until spring, giving them a crucial nutritional advantage that kept their children healthy, while neighbors' children suffered from scurvy and other deficiency diseases. Meat preservation was the most dangerous game of all. Salt curing had to be done with mathematical precision. Too little salt and the meat would rot. Too much and it would become inedible. The process required expensive salt that many families couldn't afford, forcing them to take dangerous shortcuts. The Williams family of Texas tried to preserve their winter pork supply with insufficient salt in 1935. The meat appeared fine on the outside, but was rotting on the inside. When they ate it in January, the entire family contracted trichinosis. The parasitic worms invaded their muscles, causing excruciating pain and weakness. The father became so debilitated he couldn't work, and the family lost their farm. 2 of the children died from the infection, their small bodies unable to fight off the parasites. Yet families who mastered meat preservation techniques gained access to high-quality protein that could mean the difference between thriving and merely surviving. The Novak family of Nebraska became the unofficial butchers of their community. Their expertise in smoking and curing meat so renowned that families would travel for miles to learn their techniques. This was a world where every preserved jar was a bet on your family's future, where the race against rot was literally a race against death. Battery radios, acid burns, and explosions. In the isolation of rural America, the radio was more than entertainment. It was a lifeline that could save your life or kill you, depending on how well you understood its deadly power source. The massive batteries that powered these radios were filled with sulfuric acid that could blind you permanently or eat through your skin in seconds. 8-year-old Tommy Chen of California learned this lesson in 1937 when he accidentally knocked over his family's radio battery while playing. The acid splashed across his face, destroying his left eye and leaving permanent scars across his cheek and neck. The family had no money for medical treatment, so Tommy's mother tried to treat the burns with home remedies. The infection that followed nearly killed him, and he was left partially blind and disfigured for life. But the family couldn't afford to replace the battery, so they lost their radio connection to the outside world just when they needed it most. The batteries had to be recharged regularly, a process that created invisible, odorless hydrogen gas that could explode without warning. The Martinez family of New Mexico was recharging their battery in their kitchen when a spark from their wood stove ignited the gas. The explosion blew out every window in the house and left the father with burns over 40% of his body. He survived, but his hands were so badly damaged he could never again perform the fine motor tasks essential for farming. The family's productivity plummeted, and they barely survived the following winter. Yet families who mastered radio technology gained access to information that could save their lives and livelihoods. The Johnson family of Iowa became the communication hub for their entire county. They learned to safely maintain their battery system, built a proper charging station outside their house, and established a network of information sharing that helped dozens of families avoid disasters. Weather warnings broadcast over the radio saved countless lives. Families who missed tornado warnings because their radio was broken often found themselves buried under the rubble of their homes. The 1936 tornado that devastated parts of Kansas killed entire families who had no advance warning, while families with working radios had time to seek shelter and survived. The radio also provided crucial market information that could mean the difference between profit and poverty. Farmers who didn't know crop prices could be cheated out of their entire harvest, leaving their families to face winter with no income. Those who missed announcements about crop diseases could lose everything while their neighbors saved their crops with timely interventions. But perhaps most importantly, the radio provided hope. In the darkest moments of the Depression, when families felt completely isolated and forgotten, the voices coming through the speaker reminded them that they were not alone. The shared experience of listening to programs like Little Orphan Annie created bonds between family members and gave children something to look forward to each day. This was a world where information was survival, and the radio was the bridge between isolation and connection, between ignorance and knowledge, between despair and hope. Repair everything, resourcefulness or death. In a world where nothing could be wasted, resourcefulness wasn't creativity. It was the difference between having the tools you needed to survive and watching your family suffer from preventable hardships. Every scrap of material, every broken tool, every worn-out piece of clothing was a potential solution to a life-threatening problem. The transformation of feed sacks into clothing was both an art and a necessity. But the process was fraught with danger. The burlap had to be thoroughly cleaned to remove chemicals and parasites that could cause severe skin reactions. Families who didn't properly prepare the fabric often suffered from rashes and infections that could become life-threatening in an era before antibiotics. 12-year-old Sarah Mitchell of Oklahoma developed a severe skin infection from wearing an improperly cleaned feed sack dress in 1934. The infection spread rapidly, causing painful boils across her back and arms. With no money for medical care, her mother tried to treat the infection with home remedies, but it continued to worsen. Sarah was bedridden for 3 months, unable to help with essential farm work during the critical harvest season. The family's reduced productivity that year meant they barely had enough food to survive the winter. But families who mastered the art of fabric preparation gained access to clothing that was both durable and comfortable. The Kowalski family of Minnesota developed a multi-step process for cleaning and softening feed sacks that produced fabric so fine it was indistinguishable from store-bought cloth. Their children were among the best dressed in their community, and the family's reputation for quality clothing led to a small business making clothes for neighbors, providing crucial additional income. Tool repair was a matter of survival. A broken shovel handle could be replaced with wood, but if the repair failed during critical planting season, it could mean the difference between a successful harvest and starvation. Farmers who couldn't properly repair their equipment often lost entire crops, condemning their families to hunger. The Henderson family of Iowa lost their primary plow when a hastily repaired handle broke during spring planting in 1935. With no money to buy a replacement and no time to make proper repairs, they were forced to plant their crops by hand. The backbreaking work took so long that they missed the optimal planting window, and their crop yield was reduced by more than half. The family barely survived the following winter, and the children's growth was permanently stunted by malnutrition. Yet families who developed expertise in tool repair and maintenance gained a significant advantage. The Peterson family of Nebraska became the unofficial mechanics of their community, their skill in repairing and maintaining farm equipment so renowned that neighbors would trade precious resources for their services. This expertise not only kept their own farm running efficiently, but provided additional income that helped them thrive during the Depression. The most dangerous aspect of making do was the constant exposure to toxic materials that families had no choice but to use. Lead paint was scraped off and reused, slowly poisoning entire families. Asbestos insulation was repurposed for clothing and bedding, causing lung diseases that would kill decades later. But families had no alternatives. They used whatever materials they could find, even knowing the risks. This was a world where ingenuity was survival, where every act of creativity could save your family or slowly destroy it, where making do wasn't just a skill, it was the price of staying alive in a world that offered no second chances. These weren't just survival techniques, they were a daily dance with catastrophe, where every skill mastered was a family saved, and every mistake made was a tragedy that echoed through generations. They proved that in a true crisis, the most valuable resource isn't money or technology, it's the knowledge to navigate deadly challenges when there's no room for error. And today, with power grids more fragile than ever, cyber attacks targeting infrastructure, and natural disasters increasing in frequency, their lessons aren't just history. They may be our future. The next time the lights go out, will you have the skills to keep your family alive? Or will you become another casualty of the darkness? If this episode opened your eyes to the deadly reality of survival, hit that like button and let me know in the comments which of these life or death skills you found most terrifying. Subscribe and ring the bell, because next episode we're diving into another chapter of human resilience that could save your life when everything else fails.